Throughout their relatively young history, Celebrity Cruises has brought forth several different lines of cruise ships that push the boundaries of accepted norms within their corner of the market. Some of these innovative ships have, in turn, influenced in small or moderate degrees the designs of vessels from other lines coming out around those specific times. The lead ships of each of their purpose-built classes, Horizon, Century, Millennium, and Celebrity Solstice, all brought forth features that helped elevate the luxury as well as the mainstream cruise ship experience. As great as these ships were and are, they have never defined a generation or have been the instigator of a new breed of passenger ship. Such titles have understandably been relegated to a select few throughout the nearly 200-year passenger ship timeline. In the current cruise industry, it is vessels such as Oasis of the Seas, Sovereign of the Seas, Carnival Destiny, Voyager of the Seas, Carnival Fantasy, and Icon of the Seas that have etched their names forever into the history books. For Celebrity, that all changed in December 2018 when the first ship of their newest class began her career. This was not just another ship. She was a statement about the future of the cruise ship and a revolution that would change the trajectory of not just her owners and their own vessels, but for the entirety of the mainstream cruise industry. This defining vessel was Celebrity Edge. Celebrity Edge is the lead ship in the currently ongoing Edge class. With a tonnage of just over 130,000, she is by no means a gigantic cruise ship. Although her smaller footprint is not her defining characteristic. She is the ship that instituted a lot of firsts for the passenger ship, from her offerings and accommodations down to how she was initially designed. She broke many of the rules in accepted cruise ship design, and her revolutionary approach would end up directly influencing almost every aspect of the cruise and shipbuilding industries. Before diving into the build-up and history of Celebrity Edge, let's travel back in time, about 100 years specifically. Following the conclusion of the First World War, the ocean liner industry was in shambles. Before the war, it was reaching its highest peak yet in terms of size, design, and demand. Grand ships, such as RMS Lusitania, RMS Olympic, SS Vaterland, and RMS Aquitania were the stars of the show. But during the war, much of these liners, both express and auxiliary, were requisitioned by their respective countries' militaries for various roles, including use as troop ships and hospital ships. And in some cases, specifically the liners from Germany, they were held hostage in foreign ports and spent much of the war sitting idly by. By the end, the family picture had been severely altered. Some had been lost, a few eventually returned to normal service after extensive refits, and some found themselves to be the prizes of war and were awarded to different owners who then in turn repurposed them and ran them as their own. These liners have been designed and built at a time of traditional tastes. From an exterior standpoint, they had not changed from a finished standpoint from ships found even 30 years prior. On the inside, the finish largely resembled classical styles from the Victorian and Edwardian eras. By the late 20s, many of the express ocean liners were reaching 20 years old, and largely thanks to the results of the Great War, there were no real attempts to either replace them or even try to replicate them. They had been built, literally, in a different era. Tastes had already drastically changed. Even so, it seemed that the ocean liner was doomed to stay stagnant, undeviating in design, appearance, and offerings. However, in June 1927, a new face emerged onto the oceans of the world. She was not much to look at from an exterior point of view, featuring a familiar utilitarian superstructure and a counterstern. It was of traditional design. However, it was her interior that turned out to be revolutionary. She would prove to be a game changer, which would breathe new life into the ocean liner and directly influence their design for the next several decades. She was SS Ile-de-France. Originally built as part of a 4-vessel mail and subsidy agreement between the French government and the French line, Ile-de-France proved to be more than just another ordinary ship. Not only was she the largest passenger ship built since the war, her interior design resembled that of a new and emerging style that had been birthed just a few years prior, Art Deco. Her interiors had been designed by one of the founders of this style, Pierre Bateau. It was very much an in-the-moment style. There was nothing about her interior that echoed anything from the past. She quickly became a favorite of every passenger who traveled on her, which made her one of the most successful vessels running the Atlantic crossing, even in the Depression years, carrying more first-class passengers than any other liner by 1935. It did not matter what class the passenger was in. Each had their own level of exposure to this new form of architecture and style of travel. Unlike most ships, which had at best spread their influence for only several years and maybe a few different classes from other companies, Ile-de-France's influence extended well into the 1950s, and in a few cases even today. Immediately, she kickstarted a new shipbuilding race, as she rendered all of the classic ocean liners obsolete. Legendary ships like SS Bremen, SS Rex, RMS Queen Mary, and SS Normandy can all trace their direct roots to her. What Ile-de-France ultimately proved was that passenger ships could, and sometimes should, employ a style of design that is both current and forward-looking. Before them, with some minor exceptions, ships had only replicated the past, and it was often only set aside for those who were in the higher classes. Ile-de-France demonstrated the viability of a passenger ship embracing a new and fresh style. She was also one of the first ships that began the eventual decrease in the rigid class system. Not only did the Art Deco style carry into each class, but the lower classes' standards were elevated. For example, third class, which had been previously largely utilitarian, bare, and giving cabins that resembled dormitories, were now given actual proper beds and finished interiors. This forward and future way of thinking still influences passenger ship design even to this day. Celebrity Cruises was founded in 1988 as a secondary division of the Chandris Group, which primarily focused on transporting immigrants in second-hand but comfortable ocean liners to regions like Australia. They had somewhat tapped into the cruising market with another division of their company, known as Chandris Fantasy Cruises, in the 1970s. The primary reason for the creation of the Celebrity Cruises division was to acquire several premier docking contracts in Bermuda that had been recently vacated. However, the local government only gave the contracts out to more premium and upscaled lines, and that was something the Chandris Fantasy division did not have a reputation for being. The Celebrity division's goal was simply this: to be a premium cruise line that would offer upscaled ships at relatively affordable prices. Their earliest new builds, Horizon and Zenith, became instant successes, probably to a point that their owners were not expecting. What drove this were essentially three things. First was their luxurious interior style that also happened to be very comfortable. Before then, there had not really been a balance between luxury and contemporary styles. It was all about quality and comfort over glitz and glamour on these two ships. Second, the level of service and the relaxed upscaled atmosphere proved that passengers did not need to have deep pockets to experience such a voyage, with a level of service comparable to that on luxury yachts. And lastly, the ships were very economical to run. These three things alone helped tap into a market that had been previously relatively untapped. Within several years, Celebrity had already developed a loyal following, and they went ahead and introduced a trio of ships that were not only almost double the size of their previous class's ships, but were also towards the upper side in terms of the size of cruise ships at the time. These ships were Century, Galaxy, and Mercury, and they built upon the successes of the Horizon class and took it to another level. This early and sudden success is how Celebrity ended up being bought by Royal Caribbean Cruise Line and being allowed to operate as a sister company. This happened just before Mercury started her career in October 1997. This new partnership with a well-established and financially successful brand is what allowed Celebrity to increase in ways that were previously not available to them. The first series of ships to come out after the merger was the Millennium class, which boasted 4 ships: Millennium, Infinity, Summit, and Constellation. They were more traditional in the known Celebrity style, but it had been massively increased in size, with each ship being roughly 91,000 gross tons in displacement. They did have some unique features as well that continued to push in Celebrity providing something radically different compared to the competition. The most well-known example of this is the fact that they were the first in the fleet to employ a specialty restaurant. What made this menu special on each ship was that they were themed and made up of artifacts from famous ocean liners. Most well-known of these was Millennium's, which was themed after RMS Olympic and featured paneling from her a la carte restaurant that had been removed during her scrapping that had commenced in 1935. Infinity's restaurant was themed after SS United States, Summit's was SS Normandy, and Constellation's was SS Ile-de-France. It did not take long after the release of these 4 ships for Celebrity to increase the size of their fleet yet again, and what came out had not really been seen before on such a scale. The 5 members of the Solstice class brought forth even more evolution and small elements of revolution into the Celebrity fleet. And for the first proper time, these elements began to influence in direct ways the designs of other classes from other cruise lines. Celebrity Solstice pioneered the live plants at sea concept by having a grass lawn that covered most of the entire aft section of Deck 15. Also found on board was the first glass-blowing studio at sea. The design of Solstice, and the latter members Equinox, Eclipse, Silhouette, and Reflection, were a large evolution in the concept of the all-climate ship, having the majority of their public rooms either enclosed but exposable, or if not exposable, being surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows. They were very outward-looking and versatile ships, and elements of these design choices helped influence the designs of Royal Caribbean's Quantum class, as well as Norwegian Cruise Line's Breakaway class, and the Royal class of Princess Cruises and P&O. By the early 2010s, Celebrity found itself in a bigger and better position than ever before. From the beginning, they had always been pushing the boundaries and not just breaking the accepted norms of the cruise industry, but also being the first to pioneer a variety of design choices and creating memorable, unique ships never seen before. Their partners at Royal Caribbean also found themselves in a very good and competitive spot. Being at the position they were in, and combined with the very real changes in demands and tastes for the traveling public, they were ready to pursue what would be their biggest statement yet, one that would alter the course of the cruise ship industry. It's now December 4th, 2014. A letter of intent for a new class in the Celebrity fleet was signed with the STX French shipyard located in Saint-Nazaire, France. The endeavor would be known as Project Edge, and it called for two 2,900 passenger ships with a displacement of roughly 117,000 gross tons to be built with delivery of the first vessel set in fall 2018 and the second in spring 2020. Each vessel would cost roughly $1 billion, be 984 feet long, 123 feet wide, and 190 feet high, and they would promise to build upon the modern luxury experience as demonstrated in the Millennium and Solstice vessels. They would also deliver on the versatility aspect, with being able to run both large ship itineraries as well as small ship experiences, that is, being able to get into harder to reach ports. The addition of two Project Edge vessels to our fleet delivers on our long-term strategic plan to moderate capacity growth and continues the positive momentum the Celebrity brand has achieved in the premium segment of our industry. Our new class of ship will set the standard for premium world travel and deliver the next generation of modern luxury experiences that our guests know and love. STX France designs and builds some of the most innovative and stylish cruise ships in the world, and Project Edge offers them the opportunity to, again, set a new standard for modern iconic architecture. On this stunning new ship, we will bring our guests even closer to must-see destinations of the world, while indulging them on board in the most luxurious accommodations, the finest culinary experiences, and the best hospitality delivered by our dedicated staff. Based on this information, there were several aspects that were already clear about this new class. They would be slightly smaller than the Solstice class, employ a modern and luxurious finish, continue the demonstrated Celebrity premium service, and be outward-looking. Behind the scenes, the executives of both Celebrity and Royal Caribbean Cruises Limited asked their various new build teams to find ways to completely rethink the cruising experience through the ships themselves. The core pillars in regards to designing new ships of the companies that fall under Royal Caribbean Cruise Limited, now known as Royal Caribbean Group, are traditional, evolutionary, and revolutionary. They wanted Project Edge to fall very heavily into the revolutionary category. Right away, the design team and shipyard began to utilize newer technologies that had not really been tried on such a scale before. Along with using the traditional methods of designing involving supercomputers, CAD programs, and model tank testing, the ship would now be completely built electronically by utilizing 3D and VR technology, making this project the first series of large passenger ships ever to utilize this technique of designing. By embracing this newer technology, it would allow the designers to experience any given space as if they were actually there, and that would greatly help in identifying problems that needed to be corrected. The ability to stand in a space and really understand one's surroundings had always been a nagging issue in shipbuilding. Before then, shipyards and the company's design team often relied on artistic renderings and scaled mock-ups, which obviously has many limitations. While techniques like those would still be utilized, the new 3D and VR models would be taking center stage and helping bring this new class to life. Another side benefit with these models was that it helped shipyard workers to better understand, down to the millimeter, what any passenger or engineering space was to look like, and where particular things had to be. Celebrity also brought on board several different architectural firms and individuals to help design certain public spaces on the new class, giving each of them their own area to work on. This included Kelly Hopman, who would be in charge of the accommodations, Tom Wright, who would oversee the exterior profile and majority of the upper exposed decks, Patrick Chouin and Janzit Manku would head the design of the new atrium. Scott Butler and Patricia Ricciola were to be in charge of designing a new type of entertainment, dining, and culinary experience. The list goes on and on. Even before general arrangement plans were completed, it was announced a year and a half later that Project Edge would be increasing in numbers from 2 ships to 4. This announcement came on May 25, 2016, and it stated that the 3rd ship was expected to be delivered in fall 2021, and the 4th was to be completed in fall 2022. On November 21, 2016, roughly half a year after the expanded class announcement, the first steel was cut for the first Project Edge vessel. The name was also confirmed at the ceremony. After yard number J34 would be completed and christened roughly 2 years later, she would be known then on as Celebrity Edge. The name of the second vessel was also surprisingly announced at the ceremony. Following her delivery, she would be known as Celebrity Beyond. Edge class is destined to be a trailblazer in modern luxury travel. The new ships will be on the cutting edge of innovation and the leading edge of design, so the ship names are spot on and offer a sense of how Celebrity Cruises is looking into the future. The new president and CEO of Celebrity added, "We set the bar high for the architects and designers on Edge class, and we were rewarded with a stunning design. Cutting the ship's first piece of steel is the traditional first step in the shipbuilding process, and I'm excited to see our dreams turn into reality over the next 24 months. We are excited to reveal more details soon, and travelers, trade partners, and enthusiasts alike will not be disappointed. The ship is going to be amazing." A few conclusions could be drawn about the future vessel, both from the information given by the executives, but also from the ship's profile that was created during the ceremony, the most obvious of which was that she would most likely have a parabolic bow. That alone told observers that she would be indeed a futuristic and forward-looking ship, as no large passenger ship had employed similar characteristics of that bow type for a very long time. On March 13, 2017, the first major reveal of the future Celebrity Edge was released. With regards to the first exterior rendering of the ship, the overall design was actually somewhat polarizing. This was due to her fairly obvious modern and futuristic form that definitely did its best in not being traditional. One of the major public areas revealed and focused on was the resort deck. Located on the starboard side was what was to be one of the ship's main attractions, the Magic Carpet, which would be a rising and lowering multi-purpose venue providing never-before-experienced views off the side of the ship. With the open pool deck, solarium, and the rooftop garden, it was promised that the ship would be the most intimate and inviting of the outside world a ship could be for its passengers. A new type of passenger cabin was also revealed. One quick glance at the exterior profile will make one notice that almost the entire accommodation section of the ship was not made up of balconies. What would replace the majority of them would be the infinite veranda. Rather than having the cabin and a separate balcony on the outside, it was combined into one. Facing outside, the floor-to-ceiling glass panel could be converted into a balcony by lowering the upper panel at the touch of a button. The room would provide a seamless view to the outside world and would be approximately 23% bigger than the Solstice class's balcony cabins. The bathrooms, in turn, would also be bigger, being roughly 10% greater in square footage. Overall, the interior showcased a very non-traditional, bright, and ultra-modern feel, far from what was typically found in the cruise ship industry at the time. There is a lot more that can be covered about the initial reveal, but we will leave it at that. Suffice to say, it was clear that Celebrity was upholding its promise of a revolutionary ship. Around the same time of the reveal, the majority of J-34's grand blocks have been completed and were ready for assembly. On June 21st, the keel laying ceremony was completed. The 875-ton block was placed into the forward part of the dry dock and was rested upon several lucky coins to bring the ship good luck. As the assembly phase began, more information regarding the vessel came out regarding dining and entertainment spaces, which helped further reinforce the fact that this ship was unlike any other. By January 2018, the majority of J-34 had been assembled together. Thanks to the rapid pace of construction, it was announced that she would be debuting early. Her maiden voyage had been originally scheduled to commence out of Fort Lauderdale on December 16, 2018. While that would continue to be the case, 4 short pre-inaugural cruises and 1 additional 7-night maiden voyage would occur ahead of the original Maiden. Each short pre-inaugural cruise would be only 3 days in length, with the first commencing on November 21st. The added maiden voyage would commence on December 9th. Thanks to the amazing work of the STX France shipyard team, the industry-changing Celebrity Edge is now scheduled to arrive much earlier than anticipated, which gave us the opportunity to offer not 1, but 2 maiden voyages. Both of these maiden voyages, plus the Taste of Luxury preview sailings, will have all of the festivities one would expect from the launch of such a revolutionary new ship. And now even more guests will have the chance to experience these one-of-a-kind inaugural sailings. Just a few weeks after the schedule change release, the dry dock at STX France was filled and the fully assembled J-34 was pulled out by several tugs and moved over to the fitting out basin. It would be here that her relatively empty hull would be transformed into a luxurious, functional passenger ship. July 29, 2018. J34 had been completed enough to be put through her next major milestone of construction, sea trials. While traversing the waters outside of France, she would be put through her paces and pushed to the limit, and all sorts of tests that every ship must go through, including the demonstration of the required performance characteristics outlined in the building contract. Long days of tests later, she returned to the shipyard. As is typical with the first ship in a new series, a second, more thorough round of trials were scheduled to occur later on in September. In the meantime, more information was released about her interiors and offerings. Within the final weeks of leaving the shipyard for the last time, bookings on her were not slowing down. Demand for cruising is booming, and guests are willing to pay for innovation, quality, and design. The timing of the Celebrity Edge could not be better. She's clearly worth the wait. The Edge has been booking at significant premiums for the Winter Caribbean season and for our European season next year. The demand for our new hardware, especially for Edge, which has really come high on at a premium, has been very strong and encouraging. It was almost time for the next true revolution in shipbuilding to finally make her debut.
It is a ship that has been built with love, passion, energy from thousands of people who care about fine design, all of the experiences our guests are going to have. And if you walk around the ship and you look at all the amazing details that are part of this ship, you realize that it really is a work of art. Everything is designed to give our guests a connection and bring them as close to the edge of the ship as we possibly can for deeper and richer connections to both the ocean and every place we visit, which is really the most special part about cruising. Everything that they have said about this ship and the reaction that we're even getting from consumers booking this ship has far exceeded anything that we could have imagined. Words like transformational, innovative, the coolest ship ever built, the most beautifully designed ship ever built. I've never taken a cruise before, but I'm definitely cruising on Celebrity Edge. This ship is transforming not just Celebrity, but the industry.
You know, I think what makes Edge so different and so amazingly exciting is because all the details have come together. Yes, I mean, some of the special features are wonderful, but it's all a cohesive whole. And I think the fact that the team could come up with something so imaginative and so different, you really thought we were at the pinnacle and we keep outdoing ourselves. I'm so impressed with what they've done here.
You put together drawings, and the drawings are just like a recipe. You say, basically, I want this, I want that, but you're never quite sure if the recipe is going to taste good, if it's going to be exactly what you want. So at this phase, what we're doing is we're adjusting, we're really trying to mitigate a little bit or balance our joy of finally being it and seeing it realized is always great.
Sometimes we say we design spaces, but we design memories. And the Grand Plaza, we want them to feel glamorous. We want them to feel when they enter in a space that it's an important moment in their life, in the day, but it will be something that they will remember their whole life. And so we want to create all the atmosphere around it, so the moment will really be printed in your memory.
After 4 years of planning and design, as well as nearly 2 years of construction, J34 was officially handed over to her new owners on October 31st, 2018. The Celebrity team has done an outstanding job, and I cannot thank the Chantiers de l'Antique team enough for delivering this game-changing ship and for their ongoing partnership. Their work continues to transform the way our guests experience the world. Today is a very special day for us all, as we have been eagerly anticipating this moment for more than 4 years. There are so many aspects of Celebrity Edge that are more groundbreaking than we could have ever imagined, and it is all a testament to the hard work, creativity, and talent of everyone who helped bring this magnificent ship to life. Celebrity Edge left the shipyard behind for the last time on November 6th. 2 days later, she made a brief stop in the Azores Islands before continuing on to her new home in Fort Lauderdale. She arrived there on the morning of November 19th. The newest revolution of shipbuilding was now home. She was also the first ship to utilize the newly completed Terminal 25. Now that we have covered her history up to the final days before her debut, let's now take a brief tour of her to learn a little bit more about what she has to offer to her guests. Dimensional-wise, Celebrity Edge is 1,003 feet 11 inches long, 127 feet 11 inches wide at the waterline, and 130,818 gross tons in displacement, which made her the largest ship yet for Celebrity Cruises, being roughly 5,000 tons bigger than the previous holder, Celebrity Reflection. She has a passenger capacity of 2,918 in double occupancy, a maximum capacity of 3,521, and a crew of 1,377. The total number of cabins for passengers is 1,467. 81% of those cabins are either balcony or infinite verandas, 10% are ocean view, and 9% are interior. For the crew, there are a total of 726 cabins. Starting on Deck 2 forward is the medical center. In the center is the newly reimagined embarkation and disembarkation area known as Destination Gateway. On previous cruise ships, this area was often a walled-off area of the crew space and was often dark, hard to navigate, and cramped. With this ship, it was wide open, bright, and massive. Not only that, there are multiple different ways to enter the ship's public areas after leaving the space rather than the traditional one. Deck 3 forward is the lowest level of the circular-shaped theater. Surrounding the outside of the deck are ocean view cabins. On the inside amidships is the lowest level of the 3-deck high Grand Plaza. After 2 of the 4 main dining rooms, each having a seating capacity of 360. On the starboard side is the Italian-themed Tuscan restaurant, and on the port side is the French-themed Normandy restaurant, which features several artifacts from the famous ocean liner SS Normandy. Four is the lowest of the decks, being entirely made up of public spaces. It starts off with the second level of the theater. Behind here are multiple shops and entertainment venues. Amidships is the second level of the Grand Plaza. Surrounding this space are several dining options including Le Grand Bistro and Café El Baccio. Behind here are more shops and the casino. Further back are the 2 other main dining rooms. On the starboard side is the Mediterranean-themed Cyprus restaurant, and on the port side is the largely Americana-themed Cosmopolitan restaurant. All the way at the aft is the lowest level of the expansive venue known as Eden. Down on this level is the actual dining area known as the Eden Restaurant. Forward on 5 is the highest level of the theater. Aft of here is the club and an art gallery. Surrounding the highest level of the Grand Plaza are more specialty restaurants, including Fine Cut Steakhouse and Raw on 5. Towards the aft is the Blue Restaurant, a dining venue specifically designated for Aqua Class passengers. Overlooking the ship's wake is the main level of Eden, which houses lots of relaxation areas, a cafe, bar, and a gentle ramp that goes up to Deck 6. Located around the majority of the outside of this deck are 2 separate exterior promenades that also houses the ship's 12 lifeboats, 8 of which are specially designed to also serve as tender boats. 6 is the beginning of the accommodation decks. However, all the way at the aft on this one is the highest level of Eden that features the upper level of the ramp and several seating areas that overlook the entire venue. The newly created infinite verandas are what make up the majority of the rooms that on previous ships would have been classified as balconies. The way the designers were able to pull this feature off is by moving the ship's exterior supporting structure inward. Traditionally, the outer walls are what provided the outer supports needed for the superstructure. The balcony was then simply attached to the outside of this. Now that same exoskeleton was moved inside to be an endoskeleton, freeing up even more space for the cabin and creating an unobstructed view of the outside. Decks 7 through 12 are entirely made up of various types of cabins. The only difference on Deck 12 is a restaurant located just aft of one of the largest rooms on the ship on the port side. It is the suite-only restaurant known as Lumine. The two biggest cabins on the ship are located up front and sit just above the ship's bridge, giving the guests some of the best views the ship can offer. They are known as the iconic suites. Deck 14 is the beginning of the exposed upper decks. Forward is the expansive spa complex featuring different treatment rooms, a salon, barber shop, and thermal suites. Aft of here is the solarium. Featured here is a pool, whirlpool, and the spa cafe. Amidships is the pool deck, featuring a fairly long pool on top of several tiered layers, and a bar. On starboard forward is the mast grille, and all along the majority of the starboard side are the exclusive and extra pay edge cabanas. Taking up the entirety of the remaining aft portion of this deck is the casual buffet, known as the Ocean View Cafe. It is completely enclosed with floor-to-ceiling windows and also features an exterior area right at the aft. 15 forward houses the fitness center. Behind this is the lowest level of the suite-only area known as the retreat. Here are the lowest levels of the 2-deck-high edge villas and the retreat lounge. Aft of here and overlooking the pool area are several tucked-away seating options. Making up the majority of the aft section of this deck is the rooftop garden and the rooftop garden grill restaurant. All the way at the back is the Sunset Bar. Surrounding the majority of the aft section of this deck is the lowest level of the jogging track. On the port side of the pool area is a ramp that begins to incline up to deck 16. The highest of the public accessible decks is on 16. The forward area houses the upper level of the retreat. Starting off is the sun deck, which has a pool, whirlpool, bar, and many different lounging options. Behind here are the upper levels of the Edge villas. The final part of the suite-only area is another lounging area. In the center is a semi-transparent dome crowning the top of the solarium. Amidships, the highest level of both the pool area and the running track. There are 2 whirlpools located on the port side. And finally, tucked all the way at the back, is the area that supports the giant funnel above, which, when viewed directly forward or backward, resembles the company's X logo. Located amidships and running up and down the starboard side is the Magic Carpet. Along with having its own bar, it has the ability to vertically transit the entire side, but it's mainly stationed on either decks 16, 14, 5, or 2. When stationed on decks 16 and 14, it primarily serves as a viewing platform and lounging area. When positioned on 5, it serves as an extension of Raw on 5. And when down on 2, it serves as an extension of Destination Gateway, as a transit point for the tender boats named the Edge launches. This is only utilized if the ship is in a port that requires tendering. Powering all this is a diesel-electric system consisting of 2 Wärtsilä 8L46F, 2 Wärtsilä 12V46F, and 1 Wärtsilä 12V32E engines. They help drive a propulsion system consisting of 2 ABB Azipods that help drive her at an average speed of 21.8 knots, as well as 4 Brunvoll FU-115 bow thrusters. Aiding in providing better fuel efficiency is a parabolic bow, which is primarily there to help the ship in producing less wave resistance and improving the vessel's longitudinal stability. Following the pre-inaugural short cruises, which included the naming ceremony, Celebrity Edge departed Terminal 25 at Port Everglades on the first of 2 maiden voyages on December 9, 2018. This one had stops in Key West, Costa Maya, and Grand Cayman. The second maiden voyage, which commenced on December 16th, had stops in San Juan, Tortola, and St. Martin. Following these first few voyages, she settled into a normal routine, running 7-night alternating Eastern and Western Caribbean cruises throughout the winter 2018-2019 season. With several months now elapsed from her debut, it was now time to really see if Celebrity Edge was worth all of the hype and if she lived up to the expectations given since the very beginning. And the answer was yes, she was worth the wait. There were hardly any faults that could be found regarding her design that were beyond trivial. In fact, a decent chunk of even well-experienced cruisers found their expectations challenged in a variety of ways. But before diving into those successes, let's look at the few negatives that were pointed out. They really only seem to stem from the accommodation side of things. First was the infinite veranda cabins. The only real feedback given was that in warmer climate areas, utilizing the retracting glass panel to convert the area into a balcony obviously brought in all the heat and humidity into the room instantly. And because of the ship's energy conservation efforts, the air conditioning is shut off while the panel is open. The other main issue was the retreat. On Edge, the number of suite category cabins were increased from previous classes, and that meant that the ratio of suite cabins versus regular cabins was getting smaller. This meant that the suite-only experience did not seem as exclusive. The other issue was the fact that some of the cabins under this category were positioned at the other end of the ship, and the journey did not seem worth it to utilize the exclusive area to its maximum. The only other common negatives pointed out with Edge were more related to items other than the ship. So in the grand scheme of things, that was really it for the common issues. Now let's move on into the overwhelming number of positives found. Overall, the interior and exterior of the ship was praised for being very modern, futuristic, and unlike anything seen previously in the cruise industry. Every space had clearly been designed to be used efficiently. There was no such thing as wasted or dead space. The different design styles of the various areas, including the resort deck, atrium, and Eden, all brought their own unique flavor to the overall design, and rather than competing with one another, they seemed to complement each other. The versatility of many of the venues was astounding. Take the magic carpet, for instance. It could be utilized as a bar, lounge, viewing platform, specialty dining venue, and a disembarkating platform when tied with Destination Gateway and the Edge launches. Speaking of the disembarkation process, there were aspects of the design that passengers on previous ships did not know were issues that could actually be corrected. Often, the embarkation and disembarkation process in port is a stressful and often cramped affair. Even once back on board, passengers were forced to utilize only a handful of elevators, with possibly dozens or hundreds of others waiting as well. On Edge, the space for this was massively expanded, finished with a luxury touch, and allowed for several avenues for passengers to vacate the space, including a one-deck high staircase that would dump passengers right into the Grand Plaza. This allowed for large groups of passengers to disembark and embark so much more quickly. The flow from one space to the next was found to be very easy. She is very much an outward-looking vessel. It really did not matter where a passenger was on the ship. There was always some way to really take in their surroundings. Though Edge is slightly more geared to be a warmer climate ship, she still had plenty of enclosed public spaces, including a fairly large solarium, that would offer passengers a link to the outside world. Even the negative reviewers of the infinite verandas could not fault the cabin entirely, as the unobstructed view the window offered from the comfort of the interior of the cabin could not be matched. The pool deck and the simple tiered approach, combined with the outward-facing deck furniture, was a relatively simple but brilliant move. The lack of support beams and the raised decks above also provided a relatively clean and unobstructed view outward. Now, we could go on for literally hours about all the positives found with the vessel, but we will leave it at that. Celebrity had clearly done their homework well and brought forth something that was well beyond anyone's expectations, and demonstrated that utilizing new technology, even in the designing process, could and does provide many ways to correct issues that no one thought was either possible to correct or were even there in the first place. Celebrity Edge quickly established herself as the newest revolution in shipbuilding and was demonstrating to be a real threat to the competition. There were indeed loyal passengers from other cruise lines that just had to try Celebrity out for the first time, and it was all because of how positively different and fresh she was. Demand was high. People were clamoring for the next sisters to enter the arena as soon as possible to soften the premium. By the time Edge entered service, there were 3 other confirmed sisters. Just 4 months after her Maiden in April 2019, it was announced that a 5th sister would be joining the class in fall 2024. Edge Class made an immediate hit with Celebrity Cruises' guest, and is a state-of-the-art example of technical excellence and elegant design. We can't wait to build the next one. Just a few weeks later, it was announced that the 3rd member would be bigger than Edge, adding 179 additional staterooms and making her roughly 12% bigger. Construction on the 2nd sister began on July 23, 2018, which was not that long before Edge's sea trials. It had been previously announced that she would be named Celebrity Beyond, but during the steel cutting ceremony, the name was changed to Celebrity Apex. Unfortunately, fans of Edge would have to wait a lot longer than expected to enjoy Apex, as she was delivered within the opening weeks of the global shutdown that started in late March 2020. Her maiden voyage would not occur until over a year later, on June 19, 2021, when she departed the port of Athens for a cruise around the Aegean Sea. Apex is very similar to Edge, as is typical with the second member of a new class, but there were a few minor changes and improvements made. Construction on the first expanded sister commenced on January 29, 2020, and she was given the name Celebrity Beyond. Being over 10,000 tons bigger than Edge and Apex, she entered service in April 2022 and has seen probably the best overall following of the class, even to this day. Beyond made a lot of improvements and layout changes to the Edge design, which included a newly laid out and refreshed atrium, an expanded retreat-only area, and an expanded and even more modernized pool deck. The fourth member started construction on November 17, 2021, and was given the name celebrityascent. She started her career in December 2023, and she features a lot of the same changes that Beyond made. Edge number 5 started construction just before Ascent entered service on November 7, 2023, and was given the name celebrityxcel. She promises to add a lot of new additions, improvements, and firsts to both the Edge class lineup, as well as for Celebrity. She will also be the first ship to introduce a new company paint scheme featuring several pronounced orange X's on the hull and on the funnel. In her case, it will be a part of her name text. Her maiden voyage is expected to commence in November 2025 out of Port Everglades. For the longest time, it was thought that Excel would be the final member of the Edge series. That proved not to be the case, as on January 21, 2025, a sixth member was ordered. It is expected that she will be very similar to Excel, and she is slated to enter service in 2028. Although it seems likely that she will be the last, it has yet to be officially confirmed. It is clear just by how much the class has continued to grow alone that the Edge class has been a runaway success for Celebrity and indeed the cruise industry. But their influence has expanded way beyond just their owners. In a similar manner to Ile-de-France back in the late 1920s, Edge has essentially kickstarted a new generation of futuristic, modern, and outward-looking ships. This is very evident in looking at some of the features and design choices of the competition's latest ships. Starting close to home is Royal Caribbean's Icon class. The members of this class employ a parabolic bow, a similar suite-only layout, an asymmetric pool deck, an overall asymmetric exterior, a high level of interior finishing, a number of outward-facing areas, a similar embarkation and disembarkation area, and infinite verandas. There are definitely a lot more areas that are similar, but overall, those are the bigger similarities. The same can also be said in a few ways for the Evolution class for Silversea, which also has asymmetric upper decks, a parabolic bow, and numerous outward viewing areas. With MSC Cruises World class, the bigger similarities include a parabolic bow and infinite verandas. NCL's Prima class definitely took a lot of design cues from the Edge class design, with its very forward-looking approach. She was heavily praised as well for her outward-facing concept, elevated and brighter feel, and futuristic profile. She also happens to have a parabolic bow. Again, we could go on in detail about each class's similarities to Edge, but that would take a video far longer than this one to cover all the specifics. But these are some of the overall features that were clearly lifted from Edge and her sisters. The current mega cruise ship classes that are coming out into the 2030s from Norwegian Cruise Line, Carnival, and maybe MSC would definitely be more inspired off of the Icon class, but it would not be surprising if Edge's influence continues on in various ways in their designs as well. Besides, it is very clear just by casually looking that the Icon class took a decent amount of inspiration from the Edge class. And it's not just the competition where Edge had influence. Within the Celebrity fleet, a campaign was launched to eventually bring the older ships up to standard with the Edge vessels. This campaign, named the Celebrity Revolution, was first announced back in July 2018. Within the last few months, it was also announced that the Solstice class would be getting $250 million refits to bring them up to modern standards, a level very much comparable to Edge. And lastly, Celebrity's newly announced River Cruises campaign will see at least 10 river vessels that are stated to be heavily influenced off of the Edge class. It seems pretty clear that all these pushes, from both inside and out, to try and replicate or enhance shows how successful this series of ships really are. Following the shutdowns, Celebrity Edge resumed service out of Port Everglades on June 26, 2021 for a week-long cruise. This made her the first large ship to resume normal service from a US port. In mid-October 2023, Edge was put into dry dock in Marseille for scheduled maintenance that every newer ship must go through every 5 years. She was already 5 years old at this point, but for many, they wouldn't even know it. Following the completion of that process, she headed down to Italy to conduct several one-way repositioning cruises that would end in Australia, where she would remain during the 2023-2024 winter season. This made her the first Edge-class ship to sail from there. After sailing out of Australia, she then became the first Edge-class ship to run Alaskan cruises when she repositioned there in May 2024 for the summer 2024 season. It was here where the issues regarding the infinite verandas seemed to largely go away, as the temperature that would inevitably be let into the cabins when the upper panel was lowered was a lot more tolerable. Several months later, at the end of the 2024 Alaskan season, she repositioned to Australia to run cruises out of Sydney, which commenced in October. She remained down there until April 2025, after which she once again repositioned back to Alaska, this time for the summer 2025 season. As of the making of this video, Celebrity Edge is continuing to sail 4 Celebrity cruises out of the port of Seattle, running 7-day cruises to Alaska. She is scheduled to reposition down to Australia starting in September. She will then repeat the same seasonal runs out of Alaska in summer 2026, and then back down to Australia and New Zealand for the winter 2026 and 2027 season. The great book and timeline of the passenger ship now extends nearly 200 years in length. In that time, thousands of vessels have come and gone. Most of them have been lost to the tides of time, or are only largely remembered by enthusiasts and historians. Some, however, have become legends, but only a select few can have the title of being a generation-starting ship. Great ocean liners like SS Great Britain, SS Oceanic, SS Kaiser Wilhelm der Grosse, and SS Ile-de-France are all members of that prestigious list. What resulted from their pioneering efforts were great technological advancements and the births of some of the most well-known and beloved members of the passenger ship family. Today's cruise industry far eclipses in size and scope the ocean liner industry at its peak. At the present time, there are well over 300 active cruise ships. The need to stand out, provide something different, and break away from the norm is far greater than ever before. That is what Celebrity Cruises was able to do, starting back in late 2014. As it was back in the 1920s with Ile-de-France, what resulted was a ship that was unlike anything that had gone to sea before, breaking away from so many of the accepted rules of cruise ship design. By utilizing new technology and being installed under the guidance of a forward-looking team, something truly revolutionary was born. Edge marked the beginning of a new generation of passenger ships. Her very outward-looking approach, futuristic profile, efficient layout, and upscale finish has and will continue to influence the design of cruise ships, far exceeding her in size and scale. She already has been overshadowed by some other bigger and more impressive ships. However, it is likely that those legends may not have been in the position they are now in without her, and that is what will forever cement Celebrity Edge as a monumental bookmark in the passenger ship timeline.
wanna keep it low now. If you wanna go, let's go. Let's wrap it up and hit the road. I just got an awesome vibe, striking the winner post now. Liberty's on my mind. We've taken off, we've left the ground. You gotta understand that we get one chance, one chance. You will never regret the things that we'll do. 'Cause I wanna drive through the summer night. And when we are old and gray, we'll look back at this summer night. This summer night, this summer night. Sleeping in the back of a van, roaming in the wilderness. We don't ever need a plan. We'll be alright, just you and I. Singing from the top of our lungs, dancing by the lakeside. Gonna do it while we're young. In a moment it will all be gone. You gotta understand that we get one chance, one chance. You will never regret the things that we'll do. 'Cause I wanna drive through the summer night. And when we are old and gray, we'll look back at this summer night. This summer night, this summer night. This summer night, this summer night. Someday we will look back and our hearts will be whole again. I want to remember all that happened to us. 'Cause I wanna drive through the summer night. And when we are old and gray, we'll look back at this summer night. This summer night, this summer night. Oh yeah, oh yeah. This summer night, this summer night. Oh, this summer night.
So here we go again, it's no surprise. 'Cause we know better than to roll the dice. So take this love and try to make it new. You can't fight it when it feels so true. You drive me crazy like no one else. The final moment before I lose myself. And it's no use working 9 to 5 if you want more than to stay alive. So come on over, we can make it through. Take my hand, I know just what to do. On the beat, keep dancing through the night. We stay up until the morning light, the morning light. Oh, so come on over, we can make it through. Take my hand, I know just what to do. On the beat, keep dancing through the night. We stay up until the morning light, the morning light. Oh, the morning light. Oh, I just wanna be your Superman. Come fly with me, just take my hand. And now that we are cruising in mid-flight, you better watch out for that kryptonite. So come on over, we can make it through, make it through. Take my hand, I know just what to do, just what to do. On the beat, keep dancing through the night, we're dancing. We stay up until the morning light, the morning light. Oh, stars in the sky. Did we ever stop and wondered why we let our love shine all through the night? Just you and me, babe, until the morning light. The morning light. So come on over, we can make it through. Take my hand, I know just what to do. Just what to do. On the beat, keep dancing through the night, keep dancing. We stay up until the morning light. The morning light. Don't be out of sight. On the beat, keep dancing through the night. We're dancing through the night. Stay up until the morning. Stay up until the morning light.
Stay with me if you want it.